Hi everyone, this is Group 15, and this is our presentation on our economics homework. And this is our group members and work distribution. My name is Chen Lisan, and I'm going to talk about question 1. So, it says that the COVID-19 pandemic seriously impacted the world economy between 2019 and 2022. Many countries were under lockdown for months or even years because of the virus outbreak. So first, it asks that how could the lockdown in a country influence the aggregate demand in that country? As we all know, the change in consumption, investment, government spending, and net export all influences aggregate demand. And here, what components are affected during the pandemic? Unfortunately, every component is affected, such as consumption decreases because people cannot go out to buy things anymore. And investment also decreases because the corporate operations are disrupted. And then government spending has also decreased. These decreased. The reason is same as the corporation. It's also the government is also disrupted by the heavy pandemic. And then net export also decreases because the exports or the shipments are also disrupted. Therefore, the aggregate demand decreases. And next, it tells us to use appropriate models to analyze the impacts of the lockdown on the country's economy in the short run and in the long run. So, in the short run, we can see that the aggregate demand curve moved from 81 to 82, thus causing the price level to go down from P1 to P2. And then the output also decreases as a result from Y1 from Y2 to Y1. But in the long run, the short run aggregate supply curve also shifts to the right, therefore causing the price level to further decrease. But the output has recovered back to the normal. And the third question is, what could the government of a country do in response to the short-run economic fluctuation caused by the lockdown? So here the question is asking about what fiscal policies can government do. First of all, it can increase government purchases, which increases aggregate demand. And then it can post tax credits and cut taxes or subsidize people, which gives people the incentive to purchase goods and services. So as a result, it boosts aggregate demand. And the fourth question is, what could the central bank of a country do in response to the short-run economic fluctuation caused by the lockdown? So here it's asking about what monetary policy can the central bank do? So the central bank can impose expansionary monetary policies that increases to increase money supply or to lower the interest rate, and both causes the aggregate demand to rise. And the last question is, in response to the short-run macroeconomic impacts of COVID pandemic, Taiwanese government issued quintuple stimulus vouchers to all citizens as well as permanent residents in 2021. So it's this policy a fiscal policy or monetary policy? And it tells us to introduce this policy and analyze how the policy could have solved the macroeconomic problems caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in Taiwan. So let's talk about the Taiwanese voucher policy. First of all, the policy is a fiscal policy because this is the policy gives people the vouchers, which is just a kind of money coupon that gives people free money. So it is a form of government grant or subsidy. The government directly subsidizes the people and give them free money to purchase goods and services. So this is considered a fiscal policy. And what are the effects? We can see in the graph that the policy provides people with more incentive to consume, therefore increasing the aggregate demand. The aggregate demand curve moves from 82 to 83. And then the price level rises as a result from P2 to P0. And then the output has normalized from Y2 to Y0. So the effect of the voucher policy shifts the economic situation back to the normal stage. And this is my part. Thank you.
我是国贸一小远晴，学号是111301064。Today I want to talk about the problem 2. Question 1. In the energy market, because of the import ban, the supply shift to the left, caused the energy price to rise sharply. The question 2. Because of the import ban, the import decrease caused the net export to increase. So aggregate demand will shift to the right, cause price level increase, quantity of output increase, and unemployment will decrease. Question 3. To solve inflation problem, EU authority will impose contractionary fiscal policy. As a result, aggregate demand curve will shift to the left, cause price level to decrease. Question 4. To solve the recession problem, EU authority will impose expansionary monetary policy. So the money supply will shift to the right, cause real interest rate decrease, and as real interest rate decrease, the investment will increase. So the aggregate demand will increase to solve the recession problem. Question 5. To solve inflation, we will impose the contractionary fiscal policy. So the aggregate demand curve will shift to the left, cause quantity of output to decrease in the short run, and this will worsen the recession. To solve the recession, we will impose the expansionary monetary policy. So the aggregate demand curve will shift to the right, cause the price level increase in the short run. So this will make the inflation get worse. As a result, we can't solve inflation and recession in the same time. So at the same time.
Hello everyone, I'm Hogan from the Department of International Business, and today I'm going to introduce the third question. And the first question is to introduce the trade war between USA and China. Because the US imposed trade ban against China, products made in China can no longer sell to the US. Therefore, exports of China decrease and net exports decrease. And the next question is to introduce the technological decoupling between USA and China. The US bought less products from China. China assets bought by foreign country become less. It leads to the increase of net capital outflow. And the third question is to use open economic macroeconomic model to analyze the impact of trade war on the real interest rates and real exchange rates of China. As the following graph, the trade war decreases the demand of renminbi, the real exchange rate decreases, whereas the real interest rate of China remains. The fourth question is to analyze the impact of technological decoupling on the real interest rates and real exchange rates of China. An increase in net capital outflow increased the demand for loanable funds, which increased the real interest rates and the real exchange rates at the same time. And the last question is to analyze the simultaneous impact of both trade war and technological decoupling on the real interest rates and real exchange rates of China. Decrease of the real exchange rate will be more significantly, and the real interest rate decrease the same amount as before. And here will be my part. Thank you.
大家好，我是哲学一林家豪，学号是11110409。Today I'm going to talk about the question 4. Problem 1. What is quantitative easing policy? What is the difference between quantitative easing policy and conventional monetary policy? Quantitative easing policy is a form of monetary policy in which a central bank, like the U.S. Federal Reserve, purchases securities from the open market to reduce the interest rates and increase money supply. Central monetary policy is when a central bank buys and sells short-term government bonds in order to affect the short-term interbank lending rate. QE is when a government buys long-term bonds, either government or corporate bonds, with the purpose of boosting asset prices and reducing interest rate on such bonds. Problem 2. Please introduce the quantitative easing policies adopted by USA and Japan respectively. For USA, the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, implemented several rounds of quantitative easing in response to the global financial crisis of 28. The first program, known as QE1, began in November 28 and involved the purchase of mortgage-backed securities and government bonds. The aim was to inject liquidity into the financial system and lower long-term interest rates. QE2 followed in 2010 to 2011, focusing on purchasing long-term treasury bonds, and QE3 occurred in 2012 to 2014, involving the purchase of mortgage-backed securities and treasury bonds. These measures aim to stimulate lending, investment, and consumer spending, helping to support economic recovery. For Japan, the Bank of Japan (BOJ) has implemented multiple rounds of quantitative easing over the years, primarily to combat deflation and stimulate economic growth. The policy known as QQE with yield curve control has been in effect since September 2016. Under this policy, the BOJ targets a long-term interest rate of around 0% for 10-year Japanese government bonds. Additionally, the BOJ has been purchasing large quantities of government bonds, exchange-traded funds, ETFs, and the real estate investment trusts, REITs, to provide ample liquidity and support asset prices. The goal is to increase inflation expectations and promote economic activity. Problem 3. Use a graph of money market to explain why an increase in money supply cannot lower interest rate, suggesting the existence of liquidity trap. In the picture, when the elasticity of the money demand, interest rate infinity, increase the money supply can't lower interest rate. Problem 4. Explain why the quantitative easing policy could increase aggregate demand. We know quantitative easing is a monetary policy tool where the central bank injects money into the economy by purchasing financial assets. Increases the liquidity, QE provides more funds to banks, allowing them to lend more to businesses and consumers, leading to increases the investment and consumption, cause an increase in liquidity. On the other hand, QE reduces long-term interest rate, making borrowing cheaper for businesses and individuals, encouraging investment and consumption, cause a lower interest rate. Problem 5. Use appropriate models to show how the quantitative easing policy would shift the aggregate demand curve and influence output and the overall price of the economy. Graphical and descriptive analysis are required. In the picture, the implementation of QE leads to a rightward shift in the aggregate demand curve, resulting in increased output Y to Y1 and higher overall prices P to P1. This shift reflects the expansionary impact of QE policy on the economy, stimulating demand and influencing both Y and P. Thank you for your listening.
好，是国贸一曾一博，学号是111301002. Today I want to talk about the problem 5. Number 1 is monetary neutrality. It means change in the money supply don't have a lasting impact on the economy. Classical school followers believe in this because they think changes in money supply only affect price, not real economy variables like output and employment. Number 2, multiplier effect. It is the idea that initial spending changes can have a magnified impact on the economy. Keynesian school follower believes in this because they think changes in aggregate demand can lead to further changes in income, consumption, and investment, stimulating economic activities. And number 3, difference between classical and Keynesian schools. Aspect 1, the time horizon. Classical focuses on the long-term run and the factors affecting long-term growth. Keynesian emphasizes the short run, fluctuations, and the need for immediate interventions. Aspect 2, focus on analysis. Classical concentrates on the economic growth and the long-run equilibrium. Keynesian concentrate on the business cycle, recessions, and stabilize the economy. Aspect 3, the GDP focus. Classical emphasize the general trend of GDP growth. Keynesian focuses on the fluctuations in GDP and managing aggregate demand. Aspect 4, emphasize side of economy. Classical focuses on the supply side, factors of productions, and market force. Keynesian focuses on the demand side, aggregate demand, consumption, investment, and the government spending. Aspect 5, aggregate supply curve. classical belief in the curve is vertical in the long run, indicate no lasting impact of changes in aggregate demand on the output and employment. Cations sees the curve as upward sloping in the short run, indicating changes in output and employment due to changes in aggregate demand. Number 4, I support the Keynesian school of thought because I believe that people are short-sighted and cannot wait for long-term economic change. Therefore, it aligns with the Keynesian perspective